Hey everyone, we are here with Tony for our next episode of The Watch Table. And I'm so excited to have him here. He is a local watch collector, friend, and guy in the media. We could just simply say it like that. You started out with your own blog called Rescapement, right?
That's right. So first of all, thanks so much for having me, Chase. Yes, I'm a guy in the media now. As we record this, I started at Hodinkee as an editor just a few months ago after a few years of writing my own publication called Rescapement, which is sort of now retired. So rest in peace, Rescapement, and had done some freelancing for Hodinkee and a few other publications over the years. But when the opportunity came to jump full on into the watch industry, it was something I couldn't refuse.
I think it's great now that your audience is going to grow by a millionfold, and
it's a subtle dig at Rescapement, it sounds like.
No,
I'll take it.
Rescapement was my favorite, I think, Sunday morning read.
Yeah, usually a weekend read, a nights and weekends project for me, but now I kind of live and breathe watches.
I'm so excited to have you here on the watch table. It's been something we've talked about for a little while, and it's great to have a local collector who's in the industry as well, an owner and a guy whose vision, if you will, and love of watches that I really respect.
Calling me in the industry sounds so scary, first of all, but I suppose it's true. I've always loved watches, or for the last few years, I've really gotten into them thanks to places like Hodinkee. I didn't grow up around them or anything like that, but over the last few years, I've gone deeper and deeper until I've made it a full-time career. But it kind of started when I was getting married a few years ago now after law school. And I wanted something nice to wear on my wedding day besides a suit and tie and all of that type of stuff. So I was looking for something nice, and eventually I fell into wristwatches, and I happened across this Cartier Tank. It's a platinum tank, a CPCP model from the mid 1990s, late 1990s probably. And it's a watch I've always wanted. If you would have asked me 5 years ago what my grail watch was, the answer would have been simple: a Cartier Platinum Tank. So when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, is that what I think it is? The salesperson asked, oh, is that a quartz tank? And it's not, for the people that might not know at home. It's got a nice little manual wind movement in it. It's really quite a special watch. Maybe 100 or 150 of them were ever made. And when I kind of realized that they didn't quite know what they may have had yet, or whoever might have known hadn't seen the watch yet, I started asking about how much it costs, and eventually it ended up in my collection, and it's sat there as kind of a centerpiece ever since.
We actually have another tank on the table, which is one that you bought for your father as a retirement gift. Is that right?
That's right. So this is another little tank that I bought. My dad retired about a year ago, and all he's talked about since he found out that I was super into watches was how he always wanted a tank. He loves the design, everything about it, the history, connecting it to sort of the Renault tanks from World War I and all of that type of stuff. And for his retirement, I wanted to get him something nice, something that I knew he'd never get for himself. So I eventually bought one of these Mousse de Cartier tanks from the 80s, kind of their more affordable line that they introduced then. And he likes it a lot. He loves the design, but he retired and my parents moved down to Georgia, and they've got a super active lifestyle down there nowadays. They're in their 60s, but they probably live a more active lifestyle than I do, which is kind of sad for me, not for them. But they're going to the pool, they're playing golf, and they're playing pickleball like the rest of the world apparently nowadays. And, I got him this dainty little tank, right? And it turns out he comes to me maybe, 6 months after I bought it for him. I was visiting them down there for Memorial Day just this past year, and I was wearing this watch, and my Oak Oscar Olmsted, blue dial, and he sees it on my wrist one day. He's like, "Hey, Tony, what is that?" I said, "Oh, this is my Oak Oscar Olmsted." He says, "Hey, Tony, can I try it on?" I said, "Yeah, sure, Dad. Whatever you want." And he tries it on, and 6 months later, it probably hasn't left his wrist since. He keeps telling me how it fits his lifestyle better than this little guy, the watch he's always wanted. So It's kind of a watch we trade now and then. We trade the Oak Oscar and the Tank a little bit because obviously, as we were just talking about, my wife's wearing the nicer Tank all the time. And sometimes I want to match with my wife. So I said, sure. Dad, you know, I've got to have the Tank every once in a while if you're going to be wearing my Oak Oscar Olmsted around Georgia, swimming in the pool and whatever else. So it's kind of fun now that I don't think he's into watches. He knows about the Tank and he knows about Oak Oscar. He probably thinks it's cool that it's from Chicago as well, just like me and all of that type of stuff. But more than that, I think he just likes that it actually sort of fits his lifestyle in a way that the Tank hasn't. So I guess you heard it here, folks, but you know, the Oak Oscar Olmsted, for my dad at least, is a better watch than the Cartier Tank. I'm not sure I'll ever get my dad into a watch like the Tudor Ranger, which feels like kind of a deep cut for me. And it's one of the first watches that really sent me down the path of researching a watch itself and learning everything I could about the history and what makes a watch correct, and learning about the originality of dials and learning how to examine cases and the movements inside and all of that type of stuff. And eventually I was able to acquire one of my own, which is kind of great, but it's become one of my favorite watches, you know, on top of sort of the history of the Ranger and it kind of being this enigma of a watch that the internet has always been kind of fascinated with, or at least I have. Yeah. It just wears great at 34 millimeters. You know, these 34 millimeter Oyster cases from Tudor and Rolex kind of I think they'll be perpetually undervalued because of people get scared off by 34 millimeters, for better or worse. But I'm wearing a 34 millimeter Rolex today from the 50s probably. And they're just fun watches for me that there's so many different kind of variations you can get into, and the rabbit hole is kind of never ending. But for me, it started with the Tudor Ranger and it's gone on from there.
I love that Ranger, and I think we probably read a similar article 5-6 years ago, I can't remember what it was, that was talking about how pretty much all Rangers are fake, right? Not all of them, of course, so they exist, but there's a lot of question of like what's real, what's not real, and I was presented to buy one a while ago, and because of whatever that article was that I read, I was like, no, I would love it, but no. And it's so interesting that might be one of the things that got you into the world of researching watches, because it's such a good, I was looking at articles and I was doing things and I didn't turn it into a career of writing about watches. And because I got to a point where like, no, I'm done because everything I'm reading doesn't give me enough information. And I love that was something that you've turned that passion of wanting to research, wanting to know more about it into something that turned from one watch to quite a few.
It's gone on to other watches from there. It started with the Ranger, but one of the other early watches I was fascinated by that just didn't get enough attention from other media outlets, but collectors kind of low-key knew about, was the Movado M95. Mm-hmm. It's just this great sort of mid-century chronograph made from the 40s to the 60s or so. And I actually had a friend who, funny enough, is a coworker now at Hodinkee. He works sourcing vintage watches. His name's Rich. He's from Chicago as well, but he turned me on to the Movado M95, and it's how we kind of initially bonded when he still lived here in Chicago. He had a great example. I didn't really know what it was, to be honest. I knew about some other mid-century chronographs from Universal Genève, and obviously the Daytona and Hoyers and all of that type of stuff, but he showed me this Movado, and it to me looked like this watch that was just as good, if not better than those. And it uses a case maker that Patek would use, and it's got a design like Hoyer's. You know, mine has this beautiful reverse panda dial, but you'll see panda dials as well that look really great. And I kind of, when I saw Rich's Movado M95, I went down the path of wanting to find one for myself because I just thought it was such a great looking watch, and it felt like this watch that more people should be talking about. And I did all of the things you normally do, setting up eBay alerts and all of that type of stuff. And eventually one day early on in the pandemic, I was cruising through estatesales.net, which hardcore collectors may know about, but especially during the pandemic, it was really popping because people weren't going to estate sales in person, I don't think. Mm-hmm. Estate sales were posting photos of their stuff online, and I eventually found this from an estate sale somewhere in Northern California, and I reached out to whoever was selling the stuff off because I saw it, and it had this disgusting, greasy bracelet on it. I've since replaced it with sort of a period correct Movado bracelet, but it was looking terrible. You could hardly tell what the dial looked like because of a scratched up crystal and all of this other stuff, and it wasn't moving. But it was kind of the first watch I ever took a chance on with crappy photos and all of that type of stuff that you'll hear other collectors talk about, dealing on shady corners of the internet. Yes. But I called this person up, using the phone number they had provided on the estate sale website, kind of frantically, but also not trying to give away that what they had was a somewhat special watch. I think they probably knew it was cool, but not quite how cool it was, to me at least. So I called them up frantically, like trying to get the watch, trying to figure out where to send the money. And eventually I was able to close the deal, but the thing is not giving away that what they have is something really exciting at the same time. So for the past couple of years, it's kind of been the one chronograph that I've kept in my collection. I've owned a lot of other mid-century chronographs, but it's kind of the one that sticks with me for all of the reasons I've been talking about.
And then another alum to the watch table, and also a small niche watch, if you will, is Eric Wendt,
yes,
who, if I'm correct, actually gave you this Vulcain Cricket as a gift, as a what was it for?
Just being a good guy, I think.
No,
I think ostensibly.
You heard it here first. Also, Eric Wendt gives watches to good people. Sorry, Eric.
Ostensibly, I think he gave this to me when I turned 30 earlier this year, and it's just this great sort of waterproof cricket in a steel case. He's been a big champion of crickets for years.
He's a cricket lover.
He probably owns more crickets than there are Oak Oscars around me right now, I would bet, between him and Charlie Dunn, his associate nowadays. Sure. I don't have a ton of watches with complications. We've got one chronograph on the table. Everything else is time only. I've got one dive watch at home maybe, but watches that have an interactive element are great. So I love the Cricket just for that reason, just because you can turn on the alarm and annoy people. I think when I got it, I tried to use it as my waking up alarm for about 2 days, and it makes an awful sound that I did not like waking up to. Yeah. But it's a fun watch, and it's got a great history to it. So many presidents have owned Vulcain Crickets over the years.
Now, one of your more recent pickups is a watch that you bought for yourself to celebrate a milestone.
That's right. So I'm kind of recently into watches full time, as you mentioned. I made the jump from being an attorney into Hodinkee, and I wanted to get something to commemorate the occasion, I suppose. And one of the early watches I associated with Hodinkee, and I think if you hear some of the early contributors like Ben, Clymer, and Eric, as you mentioned, one of the first watches that a lot of them kind of fell in love with and wrote about was the pole router. There's the history of it being supposedly Gerald Genta's first watch design, and it's got a great design and a great history with an association with the Scandinavian Airlines, I believe. But on top of that, it's just this fun design, right? The sort of lyre lugs and this weird dial. It kind of has like this tuxedo vibe, if that makes sense. I don't know. But I kind of wanted one because I associated with early Hodinkee in so many ways, and that's kind of what got me into watches and vintage watches. I honestly, from reading about Hodinkee in the early days, I knew about and wanted Universal Genèves before I knew what Rolex was, before I knew what a Daytona was, or any of that type of stuff. So I feel like I'll kind of always have a Universal Genève in the collection. I've owned a ton over the years, but to me, this is kind of just like a quintessential modern collector's watch that I love. And I was able to find an example with this great sort of tropical dial, I suppose. It's really aged to this really nice brown, and I kind of love looking at it too. So to be able to find a watch that's in condition like this is just great. And I honestly wear this a lot. And just kind of the final Gerald Genta design cherry on top is this. It's kind of this weird, funky trapezoidal date window. I always wanted the date window version because of this. It's kind of just this like little hint of geometry and the weird stuff that he'd come up with in years to come. So it's a simple watch, but it's just kind of got a wink of what would be ahead for him and kind of watchmaking in general, or watch design in general over the next few decades.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. And then also kind of like a weird designs, if you will, like little hints of funk.
Yep.
Some of these swatches that you like to collect, like this jellyfish. jellyfish here?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great transition, right? I kind of like I mentioned, the design is why I'm into watches in general. Like at the end of the day, it's got to be something fun that you love looking at on your wrist. And for me, like I've heard John Goldberger refer to Swatch as the last great innovation in horology, which is a bold statement coming from a guy like that, but it's kind of true, right? Like when it came about in the 80s, how we were talking about earlier, how watches can kind of signify this moment in time. And there's such great watches, there's such fun designs. And the first one I really fell in love with was the jellyfish. It's this great clear case, this clear band that goes along with it. And you can see the entire quartz movement. And for, you know, Swatch and the entire Swiss watch industry that had centuries of mechanical watchmaking, it's this kind of bold statement. Like, yeah, we're doing quartz now. Check it out. Here it is for you to look at. And it's fun to collect because it takes time to find great examples that have clear bands and clear cases like this. A lot of them have aged this absolutely disgusting yellow. So you can still get the
patina you don't want.
It's the patina you don't want, right? It takes time to find good examples, and watches are so expensive nowadays, but you can kind of get the thrill of the hunt for, you know, a couple $100 still with these. And I love that. I've bought and sold a bunch over the years. I've given some away, and they're just fun watches to kind of be on the lookout for. And you'll still find swatches on weird corners of the internet, Etsy, and all these other weird secondary resale sites. And honestly, one of the other corners of swatch collecting, if you will, that I've fallen into in the past year is their first kind of run of chronos from the 90s. You'll see a lot of really funky designs. People go crazy for like these crazy colorful Grand Prix, and I don't even know what else they're called, but I needed something a little more subdued, kind of there's a Midwestern modestness about me, I suppose. So I found this, it's called the Skate Bike, I think, but if you look at the dial, it's kind of got this exotic vibe. So there's kind of just enough fun to it that keeps me coming back, you know, pops of color and all that type of stuff. But I can still wear it without people seeing something crazy on my wrist.
So I think that actually brings us to our rapid fire question.
Let's do it.
You ready?
Yeah. I've got to put my wristwatch back on. I was feeling naked. I took it off for like 10 minutes. It felt awful.
Gotta get ready. Got it prepped. Okay. Favorite complication?
As I mentioned here, kind of a time only guy, but I love a chronograph. I've got a couple of chronographs on the table here, and something that you can play with. It gets me going. And I time random stuff.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Honestly, I think about this a lot. I love Chicago, and I've stayed here. It's not sort of the heartbeat of the watch world, but I love it. And you know,
not yet.
Not yet. That's right. We're gonna change that, right, Chase? You know, I would maybe go somewhere warmer. I'm trying to think. Man, I visited. I don't know if I would live there, but one of the favorite places I've visited is kind of Florence and Tuscany. And I can sort of romanticize a life there. Yeah. I don't know if I would live there, but I could certainly convince myself.
Some espresso. I like it. It's great.
Waving at Goldberger as he sort of strolls through the piazza. Yep.
All right. What's your favorite drink?
Are we talking alcoholic?
Anything. Water, booze, chocolate milk, whatever it is.
I mean, I pound through like a case of LaCroix probably a day. But that's like such a boring answer. I've been trying to become a wine guy.
Okay.
Is that weird?
No.
Okay. I've been trying to become a wine guy. You know, I've taken a few trips to, I've been to Tuscany, as I just mentioned. But I haven't discovered much of the wines there, I suppose. God, how do you talk about wine without sounding pretentious? But the thing is, I'm not.
We're sitting here talking about watches.
That's true.
Right? I mean,
But like, I'm not pretentious about wine at all, right? Like, still, I don't know. I'll drink, you know, a $20 or $30 bottle, and I'll enjoy it just as much as people would probably enjoy bottles that cost 10x that.
For sure.
But we've been to Sonoma and Napa a few times in the past few years, and man, I love going there. I love visiting the wineries, and then I love coming home and sort of exploring the aisles of our local Binny's or whatever alcohol store you're at, and being like, oh, we drove past that one. Yeah. We went on a tour. Like, I love It's not dissimilar to the way I love watches in the way that it's, I'm not going to call it a hobby or anything, but it's this thing that you can enjoy and interact with and enjoy with other people as well. So
Absolutely.
we'll see if it's something I actually discover, but yeah.
All right. Another hobby I know is, this might work with that, is who'd win a fight, Tiger Woods or Greg Norman?
This is a borderline political sort of discussion nowadays.
Politics aside,
but,
none of that in there.
I mean, yeah, you know, it's the shark and the tiger, right? And I'm gonna ride for my boy Tiger. He's probably one of my heroes growing up. Like, I remember watching the Masters when I was 5 years old, and he won. And he's been kind of this weird fixture in my life ever since. Not quite to the same level of my parents, but man, it's close. And when he won the Masters in 2019, I'm pretty sure I cried. So, you know, despite all of the physical ailments he's got nowadays, no one could ever step to him.
All right, there you go. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
That's an interesting question. You know, because of the fascination with watches, I have a fascination with time, I suppose. I don't know if it would be to stop time or something like that, but you know, in Harry Potter, Hermione Granger's got the, she's got like an hourglass that lets
She
her
like
sort
double
of,
herself?
Yeah, she can kind of essentially double herself. That'd be a cool thing to explore, I suppose. Is it a superpower or is it just magic? I don't know.
It's all kind of the same.
What's the difference between
Yeah,
superpower?
no,
That's
yeah.
that's an interesting question, Chase. Yeah,
talk about it.
give me a
Wow.
few bottles of
Let's
wine.
go.
Yeah,
Let's talk about it.
But something like that. I mean, Hermione Granger. Speaking of sort of fixtures in my life, that might have been my first crush, and you know, to have a superpower like that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. Now the last question: how many date discs are in this?
That's great.
jar?
Oh man, there's more than I would have realized. I'm gonna say, well, you know what? Because it's Oak Oscar, I'll say 218.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you think I'm off?
I don't actually know the answer.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't want to know. I don't want to give a reaction.
Who has to count them? It's Andrew.
Andrew, myself. I think they may know what the answer is. So
Yeah, okay.
We'll find out. Cool, man. With that, a big cheers to you. Thank you so much for joining us at the watch table.
Thank you so much for having me, Chase. And like I said, it's awesome to see a local company like yours grow, and I love everything you're doing for the city of Chicago and at Oak Oscar. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I appreciate it.